Okay, welcome everybody. We are having a new episode of the Mission Zero podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Peoples. Today is part five of my human trafficking series, and I am incredibly honored today to have Kathy Givens. Kathy is a survivor, a public speaker, a fighter. She's out there fighting against human trafficking every day. Has founded her own organization. Is an incredible advocate for human trafficking survivors and victims. Kathy, thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to
Well,
be here.
yeah, it's been we've been trying to get this conversation for a while, and you're just I know your schedule is about as busy as anybody's could possibly be. But thank you so much, and I'm very excited to have you on because you know one thing I noticed about in my previous discussions is that survivors want to help, and so you've helped a lot, and you've even got proteges that are now helping, which is amazing. And so to start off the conversation, you are a survivor yourself, and in addition to being a person who is absolutely fighting the fight and doing things out there to against this amazing scourge on the earth is what I call it. Could you tell me a little, tell the audience a little bit about your history, where you're from, in as much as you want to about your own experience into human trafficking?
Yeah, I actually laugh when people say, well, where are you from? Because I always have to pause and think about it because I've been in Texas for so long, but I'm actually from Canada. And
Oh, okay.
I'm from Canada, but I was raised in a Jamaican household. So like, I always pause like, well, where am I? What am I really? Because it's like Canadian, Jamaican, Texan, I'm all things. But I was raised in Canada with an amazing mom. And, when I share my story and my journey, I like to point out to people some vulnerabilities just to kind of dismantle some of those misconceptions out there of what trafficking looks like. Because trafficking doesn't have a look, right? It doesn't
Hmm.
discriminate. It targets everyone. And so for me, telling my background, which I'm glad you asked, is really important because it does debunk some of those misconceptions. I
Hmm.
was raised in a single parent household. However, my every memory of my father was absolutely amazing, right? So it wasn't like, when I was younger and he left, it was just like, okay, grown-ups, I didn't understand what was happening, but grown-ups go through hard things, but I didn't hate my father or didn't hate my mom. It was just one of those things. And my mom did everything that she could to make sure that me and my siblings were provided for. So, in all, it was a good home, right? It was a good home. And there was a point where my mom, I guess because of grown up things and people go through hard things in life, she decided to relocate to Texas. Actually, it was presented as a vacation that we were going to go on.
A very
so,
long one.
so, so I tell people all the time, this is the longest summer vacation I've ever been on because here it is. I'm living in Texas, right? But that's how she presented it. And we were going to go and just because we had family in Texas and I'm just going to visit, right? Now I know as a grown up, she probably just needed just to get away. Like, let me just get away for a minute. And she, scoped out some areas and some neighborhoods here. And she was like, okay, this is it. She made her decision. Unfortunately, when she made that decision, unfortunately for me, when she made that decision, it was right about the time where school was about to start. So it was like, oh, yeah, you're just going to stay here with family. I'm going to go back and get all our stuff. And that to me was like, wait, what? And so it's a funny story, sort of, but already I've pointed out a few vulnerabilities, right? Single parent household, um, divorced household, single parent, my mom by herself raising children, and then we make this big move, and this big move happened at a very pivotal time of my life at 14 years old. So I was just like coming into like my teenage years and trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to be? And now there's this big change, and now I'm in Texas, and I'm just gonna say, and I say it everywhere, the only things that I knew about Texas was like westerns, right? So like I was devastated. I was frantic. I was like, I refuse to live in hay houses and ride horses to school. Like I'm not, like I was devastated because it was just such a culture shock. That's another vulnerability, though, right? I'm
Yeah.
Canadian, raised in a Jamaican household. Now I'm in Texas. I have to learn how to say y'all and all these other terms that I've like are foreign to me. And then I was the oddball in school too. So I was for me, I had like that an accent, and I just people just knew I didn't belong. So that's another vulnerability, right? So now you see how easily these vulnerabilities stack. And but I mean, I survived high school, thank God. And it was hard because my high school years was kind of just me being a chameleon because I didn't know how to be. I didn't know what this new place was. And so, whatever anyone told me that I should be, I did it. And that's typically who traffickers look for, right? So, I'm already setting it up for like, okay, even though I had a great household, I was still trying to figure out what this new life was about. And because I was a chameleon in school and a follower, let's just be honest, I was just like this very passive person. Had a lot of insecurities because I knew that I didn't fit in. I knew I didn't belong. It was just really hard for me. I did go through sexual assault in school, and that was buried because I was just like, when you go through something like that, you just bury it and you blame. We talk about victim blaming, and a lot of the victim blaming comes from self blame because you can't trust society to understand, right? Because society tells you that you're the problem. You must have been dressing a certain way. You must have let him in, or you must have, like all these things. So again, another vulnerability. So by the time I graduated, I was pretty secure about my journey, pretty secure about like what I wanted to be, um, what I wanted to do, in terms of like when I grow up, I want to get these degrees and I want to be this and I want to be that. That was pretty lined out, but I was still, battling with a lot of insecurity. So first year college, after high school, and a friend of mine, there was this big talent show in town, and she is a singer, and back then was an aspiring singer. So like every artist, if you played an instrument, if you sang, if you rap, whatever you did, every artist was at this big talent show because it was like a national scouting thing where they were like, if you win, you're going to get this record label or whatever. So every artist in Houston was there. Every aspiring artist was there. And she went, and I did not because I don't sing. Um, but she came back and she was telling us all about it. And it was so fun. She had so much fun. But the highlight of her experience was that she met this guy band. And this guy band, she just kept going on and on about this guy band, like, oh my gosh, they were so fun and handsome and like all the things. And they extended an invitation for her to invite her friends to come hang out with them, to go hang out with them. And I was one of those friends, right? So I go and I hang out, me and my friends, and a lot of people will say, aha, that's when the trafficking happened. But it didn't. Actually, we had a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun skipping school and going to these hang out with these people, right? And that's the
Yeah.
bad part. Just being young. And we laughed and we joked, and this went on for months and months, um, of just hanging out with these people. And then slowly our crew, like our girl crew, me and my friends started to separate. And it was a clear divide. We were bickering and getting into arguments, and like all of a sudden it was just, me and this person. Um, and the tactic that this person used was creating that divide, right? Um, and extending solo invitations to me. So it was no longer, hey girls, come hang out with us. It was like, no, Kathy, I want you to come hang out with me, just you. And the person that was extending that invitation happened to be the leader of this band. So he happened to be the most charismatic. He was the most charming. He played all of the instruments. He had like the best voice. He was the person. And he would say things about my friends, like, oh, they're talking about you. You're so talented. You don't even need to be with them. And little things that young people, especially young, vulnerable people, believe. And that's where that separation happened. So when by the time he was extending invitations, like, yeah, you just come hang out with me, it wasn't even a second thought. It wasn't like how it started where I would pick up the phone and call the girlfriends like, hey, let's go hang out. It was like, okay, I'm going to go, because now there's this divide. And that was like stage, what we call stage 3 of the grooming process. So I've already went through some of those stages where a person befriends you, they alienate you, and
Yeah.
then they isolate you, right? Intoxicate you. So I always tell people that stage of intoxication for me, because I had all these insecurities, that stage of intoxication for me was not drugs and alcohol. That stage of intoxication for me was the sense of belonging and acceptance. And I
Hmm.
craved that so much. And this person knew that I was the weakest link, right? So all my other friends had came from 2-parent households. All my other friends had like strong voices because they were raised here. They were Texans, right? They knew who they were. They didn't have this identity crisis, not the same one that I was going through. Um, and this person saw that. He saw that, and he targeted me. And the grooming process, what we call the grooming process of him getting to know me, I thought that I was in a relationship. He was definitely grooming. That process lasted a little over a year of him wanting to know everything about me, him wanting to know my favorite color, making me feel, again, feeding that belonging and feeding that acceptance, right?
Yes.
All false, of course. So by the end of that, he laid the plan, and he was like, he set it up so beautifully, right? To where I was eating from the palm of his hand. Anything that he said, my moral compass was absolutely skewed at this point. So anything that he said, I believed. And at that point, he was like, yeah, we're going to go head out to Dallas, and we're going to meet some investors because I'm going to start this business, and I need you to be a part of the team. And I didn't know anything about business or anything like that, nothing about music. So I was kind of perplexed as to why he was asking me. And then he turned on the charm, right? Oh, because I can't do this life without you. I can't, I need you in my corner. All things that a broken young girl would want to hear. A broken young girl who misses her dad, that doesn't even know she misses her dad,
Yeah.
wants to hear. But he knew it, right?
Yeah.
So so my answer was yes. And it was supposed to be like, we're going to go to Dallas for a few months. By this time, I was alien. I was completely isolated, not knowing that I was isolated, but I didn't want to be around my mom anymore. I didn't want to be around my friends. A lot of people think that isolation means you're locked away somewhere. I was totally around people, but mentally I was not. Emotionally I was not. I wasn't locked up anywhere, but I was totally isolated. So the answer was yes, and then that's where he would, that's where he capitalized and was like, okay, you're going to come with me. And so he drafted this elaborate plan to get me away from my support network, got to Dallas. And I used to say that when I got to Dallas, he turned into a complete monster. Now, further on in my journey, I'm understanding that actually he was always that way. But for me, I got like the blinders were starting to come off, right? The scales on my eyes were like I was getting a peek at what he was really like. So it was like, oh, wait, this person is like this. Um, but it was very drastic to me at that time. The way that I processed it, it was a very drastic change, is how I processed it, because I couldn't understand why he became violent. I couldn't understand why I was forced to do all these things, because immediately, literally, it was like the night that we got there, I was given instructions to do XYZ. Got to take pictures. You got to dress this way. And I was terrified, because he did use a lot of violence. And so if we think about what trafficking is with force, fraud, and coercion, traffickers can use any one of those things or all three. So it can start off with coercion and then fraud. And when we got to Dallas, for me, it was force, because now he's violent. Um, and obviously, it was not the business that I had anticipated, right? It was all a lie to try to get me away from my support network. And I was just that first night that we were there, it was like I already had dates set up. So he had already booked people to come. And I say rape. I don't know another term for it, because if it's not 100%, if it's not consensual, then it's rape, right? No matter if
Mm-hmm.
you're forced into saying it, coerced, or whatever. But traffickers are real good about making you feel like you're a part of the team, that you're making choice. And so in that, a lot of for me, in that, a lot of the decision making, what I thought was decision making, was poor choices on my part. Like, how could I just let this man do this to me, or how could I just do that? But it wasn't me. It was things that I was forced to do. And like I said, he already had dates set up, so this plan was very elaborate. Um, and it just spiraled after that. Men would come to the room, and I was forced to do things, sex acts. And it's hard because I tell people all the time, when I was out there, the trafficker was very scary. Yes. This person that I thought I was in love with flipped on me. Yes. But I still, because of the trauma bond and because of the coerced attachment that we had, he was like the only person that I trusted too. So for me, the scariness was not necessarily from him, because I was numb to his behavior by then. By the time I got into it, I was numb to his behavior. Violence was Abuse was normal. Him talking down to me was normal. Like, all that was numb to me. What was really scary though, and was really freaking me out, was the people that were participating. So like the buyers, like I was literally like in shock at, like, oh my gosh, there's a car seat in the back seat of your car. You
Yeah.
have a wedding ring on. You have military stripes like in your car. You have like badges. I know that you have like a thing that says you're a pastor at your house. Like, these are things that people don't want to talk about. So in a sense, when you're out there being victimized, think about it. You're seeing all these things. So everything that I was taught, and all the people that I was taught to trust law enforcement, military is good, go to church, all these
Yeah.
things. Now I'm seeing all these people that I was taught to trust as bad actors and violating me. So it's like, what's normal, right? So there, I had a very skewed view at what normal looked like while I was out there. And awful things happened, right? Like, I had guns pulled on me. I was gang raped. I was like, everything, everything that you probably already heard and
Yeah.
probably could even imagine that could happen, happened to me. There are things that I share publicly about my journey, and then there are things that I don't share.
Mm.
And then there are things that I know for a fact I can't even remember, because it was such a blur. I know for a fact that my brain has blocked out certain things to the point where I can remember scents, or like I'll see an image and it'll freak me out, but I don't know why I'm freaked out at that image, or I don't need know why I'm freaked out at that scent or that smell. So I know for a fact that my brain and God literally protecting me from some of the things that I went out there, because there were a lot of blackout moments, right? You go to sleep somewhere, you wake up in another place, or you're being transported to one place and then you end up somewhere else. So there was a lot of those nights too. So it was really horrible. Um, like I said, just you kind of own it though when you're out there. You're like, yeah, he's making me do. You can't really discern, like, is he making me do this, or am I doing this? Like, is this my life, or am I forced? So a lot of people, when you're out there, they don't call it trafficking. Like, you don't think that you're being trafficked, because that's not even a term that anybody uses.
They make it feel like it's your decision.
It makes you feel like it's your decision, or you're
Mm-hmm.
just trying to survive, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no title to any of this. It's just like, I'm out here trying to survive. I just want to make it to the next moment. I just want to make it to the next day. So in that moment, you're like, what do I need to do to make it to that next day? And whatever it takes is whatever it takes, under the instruction or not, right? So it's kind of like, that's how it was for me. And he had other people there. It wasn't just me. When I arrived in Dallas, just to back up, when I arrived there, that's when I noticed that there were other people there, other women, other girls. There were young girls. There were, and I would often get in trouble meaning suffer violence, but I would often get in trouble for sending people away, sending some of his, what he would call his girls, away, because they were like, we would confide in each other, and I'm like, well, you're young and you have a baby, you go, I'll stay, you know. So even out there, you still are looking out for, you still have this compassion, for other people, because you think that it's too late for you, you know what I'm saying, but I'm going to look out for someone else. If I can save someone else, then, you know, I will. So that I think for me, that's what kept me going too, is looking out for other people,
Yeah.
while I was out there. And that's what I do still today, is look out for other people. I've never lost that, because I believe that's the strength that kept me alive and that gave me hope.
Yeah. You know, listening to your story there, and this is, I've done the training from Redeemed House, and I've done a lot of the listening now as I've started this journey to be a part of this fight, and the themes that you just mentioned, boy, they're almost always there. There's the isolation, the going after young women with vulnerabilities, going after people that are lacking things in their life, and pretending to fill that void, right? And so that's a lot of that is what's happening, and the reason I reiterate that is because that's knowing that is prevention, or I guess can help with prevention. It's like, okay, how do these guys and females that are actually doing this to young women, and sometimes males as well, it is a absolute psychological warfare on these young women. It's not, I've said it in almost every episode, it's reiterated in every episode that I do here, is that it's not a pull up in a van and throw a cover over your head and throw you in the back of the van and do that. It's not. It was a year long manipulation process. That isn't as David Reed said, that is not beneficial to these people. The benefit is to psychologically manipulate people into believing that they have no one else. They are the person there for them, and there's no other life you can lead, and it works, and it's not a weakness in as a human being. This could happen to almost anyone, especially, but it's really when people are at vulnerable parts of their lives and have had some trauma. I remember you mentioned something with trauma. I had not heard that word. I forgot what you said, but you said trauma something. Um,
Trauma forced attachment, or trauma bond.
Trauma bond. There you
Yeah,
go. Trauma
yeah.
bond. I had not heard that word before, so that was interesting to hear. And so you're in this lifestyle now. It's happening now. Um, that happened. It seemed to be right at what, in the early 20s for you. Is that
Yep.
okay? If you don't mind, fast forward to I guess kind of the process of removing yourself from it. How were you rescued, or how did you fight your way out of it, and how long down the line was this?
Yeah. So, if you remember, he proposed a plan of like, well, we're going to go for like a couple of months, 3 months, really, is what he said. Well, that
Mm,
turned into like almost a year of my life, of just being out there every single day, like literally every single day. There was no rest. But it came to a point where one of the individuals that was also, that he was also trafficking, had, she got really sick, and to the point where he couldn't take it, like he couldn't handle her. And I knew that she had, um, a good group of doctors in Houston, because this sickness and this illness that she was dealing with was, uh, something in her history, right? That she's been
mm,
battling for a long time.
mm,
And I asked him if we could get her back to Houston and get her into the hospital where at least the doctors know her. And he said yes. And he went for it because he was tired of dealing with her. Um, and he was like, okay, whatever, because this is really distracting our work. So we'll go get her into the hospital in Houston. And the reason why he agreed to the plan in Houston was because they actually shared a child together. So this person that was
mm,
experiencing trafficking, they actually shared a child together. So because this trafficker, this individual was two people, not two, he was multiple people, but people did know him as the father and the family man. They knew him as a business owner. They knew him as, like, they might have, I'm sure if you're around people, you can sense that there's something that's off, but nobody would just be like, oh yeah, not anybody, because people knew, but certain people, the family people, would probably never say, oh yeah, he's a pimp, oh yeah, he does this to women, you know. They probably
Yeah.
just thought he was a family guy with some sketchy business going on.
Yeah.
All that to say, if something was to happen to her, or if we would have left her in Dallas and then all of a sudden the child's mom doesn't come back, that points a lot of fingers at him, right? And now he's in big trouble. So I think that's why he actually went for the plan. When we got back to Houston, got her into the hospital, which was an experience in itself, because I walked into the hospital with her and with him, and I was still able to leave with the trafficker, which is interesting. But that's another time for another show, because
Hmm.
I had all the evidence of being a person that was in distress,
Hmm.
but nobody helped me. I'm in a hospital, and nobody like noticed. Um, so I did. We got her checked in. I left with him, but because we were back in Houston, where things were familiar to me, neighborhoods, street signs, the false Kathy, the Kathy that I was out there, which I wasn't myself when I was out there, because my survival, I had turned into a survival. It's like an alter ego to survive,
Yeah.
um, to process that trauma. That person was confronted with the reality of like, hey, this is your home. This is Houston. And so I was forced to like, oh my gosh, like reality was scaring me. Um, and I was forced to deal with like, I was once in Houston. I belong in Houston. I have loved ones in Houston. What is happening right now? My whole normal for the last year had been this person. So now I'm confronted with reality. So I started to freak out, needless to say. So I had some trauma, I was very activated mentally, and emotionally, to the point where I was so clingy to him, which just sounds very weird, but that trauma bond is serious.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
I was afraid of reality, and I was taught and manipulated to fear people. I literally was like scared to not be with this person. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't be normal without you. Like, how are they going to look at me? To the point where he couldn't handle me either. So he was very like, what is wrong with you? You're freaking out, because I was literally having like a nervous breakdown is not the right clinical term, but it definitely manifested in that way, right? And he was exhausted with dealing with the other person that he had just put in the hospital. By the time I started to get really activated, he was like, you need to call somebody to come pick you up, because I'm not dealing with this tonight. I just want to go to sleep. I'll come pick you back up in the morning. So his plan was to let me call, like a family member or whatever, to come pick me up so I can spend the night. And then he was going to pick me up the next morning. And honestly, I would have went. And he knew it. That's why he felt so comfortable, because um, family was no longer a threat to me. To him, he had already tore that down. Support community was no longer a threat. He literally, I'm telling you, he literally had my
All this.
entire mind. So if he would have, I complied. I was like, okay, I'll see you tomorrow morning. But I was scared to go back. I was like, I don't want to leave you. Like, it's scary. I don't want to be with these people. They don't know. And really, as I'm saying that, internally, what I was really saying was, there's no one. I was screaming inside. There's no one that's going to understand what I have been through. I am belittled. I am not worthy. I don't fit in normal. I would rather die with you than to try to explain to society and family where I've been.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's really what I was trying to communicate. Um, and he let me go, but he underestimated the power of my support system, because when he let me go, even though I would have gone back, my family did not let me go back. So I was brought to my brother came and picked me up from a hotel room, and he played it really smooth too, because a lot of people were like, well, how did your brother didn't like beat him up or anything? No, he actually got on the phone with my brother and was like, hey, something's wrong, I feel so concerned. And he played it so smooth, um, like the caring, loving boyfriend. Like, hey, I
Mm.
think he just wants to be with you. Like, he. I mean, when I tell you that he was an actor, and many of them are. They're like they're psychologists and actors all in one. Um, so my brother and my sister-in-law didn't know what to think. They came and got me from the hotel, and they were like, "Yeah, she's really sick." But there were no, at that time, I didn't have like black eyes or anything like that. So I went, and my mom, however, was like, I wasn't eating, I wasn't talking, and I had lost a bunch of weight. And just from those three things, they were like, "Yeah, you're not going back. We don't know what happened to you." They couldn't see or find any bruises like on me. They couldn't see the physical scars, but they knew, yeah, something's not right. Again, because it's the simple fact that I wouldn't look them in the eye. I wouldn't talk to them. I was basically mute when I got back. And when I did talk, I lashed out, like, "Why aren't you letting me go see him?" Um, so literally he had, there was a point where he was, I would say, go as far as to say that he had like my soul at a point, right? In some sense, because I was so tied to this person. And over time, he did try to come pick me up, and he did try to, but they just wouldn't let him. They wouldn't let him see me. And the type of trafficker that he is, again, there's different types of traffickers. We heard about like what we see on TV, the gorillas. We call them
Yeah.
gorilla traffickers, who go kick down doors and they'll hold guns to your head and all those.
Hmm.
There are those types of people, but then there are also traffickers that have to keep up an image. They cannot. They're not going to be the ones kicking down doors, because they can just go get another person to traffic. So
Yeah.
if it's a loss, then it's just a loss. Um, so that was my type of trafficker. So he did try pretty persistently to persuade me to go and leave, but every time I tried, my family would block that. And it just over time, I started, time apart for him, I started thinking like, this hurts. This thing that I call love for this person, actually it hurts. And when I was able to start processing that, I started processing like, what did I just go through, right? So it was a long journey for me. I would say, it sounds crazy, but 7 years for me to actually like come to the trafficking language. Like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I was sold like this. How did I get there? So it was a very long journey for me. And I think it was long for me because back then, when this happened to me, early 2000s, there, I wasn't aware of all of the programs that exist now. I wasn't
Hmm.
aware that you're allowed to say, "Hey, I actually went through this, and I don't think it was good for me." Right
Yeah.
now, you have support to say that, but before, I just didn't want to be labeled as a prostitute, so I didn't.
Well, a couple of things that you've said that's really struck me, and one, you said, I don't know another word to call it except rape, because if it's not completely consensual, it is rape, and it's. I think some guys, whether they knowingly do it or they don't, or they've tried to separate it, have come to the idea that, and to me, it's a lot of the massage parlors,
Hmm.
and I tell guys, they go in there, "Oh, it's funny. It's almost like a rites of passage thing." I was like, no, no, no. These women are forced to be there, and you are raping them, and you are contributing to human and sexual trafficking.
Hmm.
They can't leave. They don't want to do it, and they're forced to be there. And so I'm glad you said it that way, because that the idea, the the language behind it, and I'll say what it's, what in society we call it, the rub and tug, or the happy ending massage places. That needs, the whole aura behind it needs to change, and
Yeah.
it needs to change drastically, because it's not, it's not, it is rape, and you are contributing to it, and you are part of the problem when you do that. And another thing that kind of, I guess, really struck me what you were talking about. My first two interviews with survivors um, were with people who had no support system, and it's really interesting and enlightening to hear someone that it's such a sophisticated process that can happen to someone that actually did have people that cared about them, and so that was, they can separate people with a support system from their family as well as people without one. It's much easier with the people without one, but obviously when it's obviously done with people who have people who love them around them and have people who have their best interest in mind. It can still happen. And and in the isolation of it is really, to me, the key. I mean, just separating you from your family and going to psychological warfare is just, I know it, I've heard the story, and it's still just, it's staggering to me when I hear it from people about how sophisticated it is what these men do. But 7 years to, you say, to come to terms with the trauma and to learn how to battle the trauma. We learn in our training that trauma is not, you don't rid yourself of that memory. You don't rid yourself of that trauma. You try to figure out how to live life with it and deal with it, right? And so 7 years, you learn to admit what it was to yourself and to deal with the trauma. Is that point where you said, okay, not only do I want to deal with this, I want to enter a life of fighting this?
Yeah, my first um I've always been like I've always loved to serve, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I was invited I was invited to serve on an outreach program, and I was told that it was like to help women, and I was like, oh yeah, that's my jam. Like I want to help women, um, and by then I had already written. I couldn't speak what I couldn't like say what happened to me. So I was keeping a journal. And so that
Mm-hmm.
journal like became like a book and all that. But I would like share with people, right? I wouldn't say, hey, this is what happened to me. I'd be like, hey, you sound like you're going through a similar situation. Read this journal. Um, and so this person that invited me to this outreach, she had read the book, and she was like, yeah, I think you should come serve over here. And I was like, okay, cool. I like serving women. And it was in that orientation, because there was an orientation before you go out and do outreach. And it was in that orientation that I was sitting there and I was like, oh my God, there's a name to this. That's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what I've gone through, right? And the person that invited me was like, yeah, that's why I wanted you to come. So that was
Yeah.
like the first time. And I had two emotions. I was sad for my younger self and I was pissed. And those two emotions drove me into like this work that I do now. Cause I'm like, if I can help someone by just sharing what happened to me, um, then I want to do that. And then I learned that not only is sharing what happened to me helpful, but actually providing the tools that I've learned, and sharing those tools and connecting people to resources. I was like, yeah, if I can prevent it from happening to my younger self,
Yeah.
and like I think the image that I had in my head was all of those other girls, that he was trafficking. Where are they now? Right? If I can help these people, then I'm going to do that. So I kind of feel like I was called to this work, and this is just what I'm supposed to do. I don't think it's the only thing that I'm supposed to do, but I definitely
Sure.
know that it's something that I am supposed to do.
Did you find it helpful to know you were not alone in this? Like when you,
100%.
yeah, I can imagine that when, it's, I suffered an illness last year for 9 to 10 months that I didn't know what the illness was, but it was completely debilitating to me. And, and I'm not, trust me, I am not comparing these two things, but it was when it was finally after 10 or 11 months diagnosed correctly and I began to get treatment for it. It was so comforting to go online and read about these people. Same thing, and and I thought about that when you said that. I was like, I bet it was not relieving, but just great to hear that you were not alone, and there are people that will understand what happened to you that you could talk to, and I bet that was a pretty amazing thing for you and your journey here.
Oh, 100%. To feel like, because when you're isolated and you're in your
Mm.
own thoughts and you think that it's only you,
Yeah.
there's no way to bounce back. Like you can't be normal with those thoughts, right? Because it's like I literally cannot talk to anyone, even my family, who was loving and kind and all the stuff. I'm like, I would be out to dinner and everyone's laughing and talking, and I'm screaming on the inside because y'all don't know what I've been through.
Yeah.
But now, like when I'm in like a support group or leading a support group or sitting in with other individuals that have the same experience, I can literally just laugh and talk and know, just by knowing that we all understand each other's journey, it
Hmm.
just gives me such peace. Um, it just gives me such peace. Like to know that we're not alone, and that we can use our voice now.
It was, I think, the reason I decided to do this, I've had this podcast for a while, but the reason I decided to do this was at your banquet event. And it was just one singular moment where I'm sitting there and I'm looking across and I see these ladies and they're full of life and they're so happy with joy. And I'm sitting there looking at them and I'm sitting there talking to a lady there. She goes, "Yeah, those ladies are survivors." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like that is incredible that they were able to come back into being who they are now." And if you listen to them, they're both full of life and they're both succeeding, in whatever in the endeavors that they're doing as well as you. And that was just an incredible feeling. I was like, you know what, the biggest I think the biggest roadblock to fighting this thing is the enigma or stigma, not enigma, stigma of talking about it. And I've noticed that since I've been involved and try to talk to people, most people want to keep it surface level. They don't want to talk about, they don't want to get too much into talking about hurting young people. And I get that. But it's got to happen. And so I try to make it as comfortable as it is, but it's nice. But that's why I was wanting to, you know, get you ladies' stories out there and say, okay, look, these are people, these are real people. This happened. Here's how horrible it is. This is why you need to help, and this is why you need to be a part of the process. So I want to go back real quick. You wrote a journal that turned into a book. So how did it turn into a book, and what is that book called?
It's called Destined, the Unspoken Revealed. So the way that I wrote that, the way when I was journaling my experience, I would get physically sick and I would have to stop. It took me so long to
Mhm.
get it out. And I think that that was just my long process of healing, because I just couldn't believe what happened to me. So I scrapped that and I was like, okay, maybe if I write a fictional story, because I've always loved writing. So I was like, how can I articulate this creatively to where I'm not saying, and you experienced this, Kathy, like in my journal. So I just put names to it, and then it just became this story. It's very true, but it's fictional characters and no names because, just no names for safety reasons and things like that.
Sure, sure.
Um, and I gave it to someone. I self-published it. So like I wrote it out and I never read it again. So like when people read it, if they tell me, oh, there's a mistake in here, I'm like, I don't care. I would never fix it. I'll never edit it. I'll never do it again, because that was my like get it out project.
Hmm.
And I put it on Amazon and people started reading it. And then I started getting emails and like messages of how powerful it was and how much healing it brought people themselves, right? So
Yes.
people that had gone through similar situations or similar types of trauma, or trafficking specifically, they were like, oh my gosh, like, thank you for getting this out. And then I realized like the power in it. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Just simply sharing can help someone, for me. And it's not, this is me not saying that, everyone doesn't have to share, because I just believe no one is obligated to share their personal experiences.
Mhm.
However, for me and from others that you've talked to, for us, it's our healing process. It's like, if I can get it out, I'm going to get it out. So yeah, that book is on Amazon. It's called Destined, the Unspoken Revealed. It's my first diary. Working on some more projects, but that one is special to me. Will always be special to me, no matter how many books I get out there, because it was like, ugh, I just need to get it out. This is what happened. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And so, of all the things you do, 1211 Partners is how I met you. How did you, I guess I'd like you to tell what 1211 Partners is, how it, not doesn't matter much how it came to fruition, but 1211 Partners, when was it started and what does it do?
Yeah, 1211 Partners was founded in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic, which was wild,
Mm-hmm.
but it was needed. Since that first volunteer experience that I told you about,
Mm-hmm.
I've just dove into the work. So I've had the honor of partnering with many organizations, working for organizations, going as far as like the federal level, and working on the United States Council, the Human Trafficking Council, Survivor Council. Um, and from those experiences, I was able to see the full picture of like what the landscape is and what it looks like in combating trafficking. So 1211, we saw some gaps. So it wasn't to duplicate services or anything. It was literally we saw some gaps. And one of the gaps that we identified was that people were really struggling with community, like the lack of community. So
Hmm.
when individuals that experience trafficking would go through programs, they graduate, and it's like, yeah, you graduated this program, this 18-month program or whatever, go do life, right? And it's like when you get a degree and it's like, okay, go do life, or you get a high school diploma, go do life. And it's like, well, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? Like all the things that you've learned, no one's really showing you how to apply them. Um, and so, yeah, we got a bunch of people together, other overcomers together to say, what's the problem? Especially with COVID, a lot of people are losing jobs and going back into the lifestyle. So, or they were severely at
Mm.
risk. So it's kind of like, well, what's happening? What's going on? And the number one answer was lack of community. It wasn't just finances. It was lack of community. I don't have anybody. I don't have anyone that I can call to talk about parenting. I don't have anyone that I can call to talk about how this job sucks or how much I love it. Like I don't have anyone. Um,
But
so
that seems like that's, and just when this in the topic we're discussing, lack of community is causing a lot of problems. Not just making young women vulnerable. It's everything. Young men are vulnerable now, and the lack of community is to me maybe the greatest problem in our country right now. But
yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's just when you were sitting there saying it, I'm like, I've been thinking about that too. How we used
Hmm.
to have churches, and we used to, people used to care about you.
Yes.
Other people used to would teach you things if they saw you. If they, you know what, and I told people a funny story is that I grew up in Georgia and in the '80s and the '90s, and so other people's parents would discipline you, not just your
Yes.
parents. I
Exactly.
remember, and I laughed so hard. It's his son's famous now. It's Michael Hardman. He's a famous
Hmm.
football player now, and his I grew up with his father and uncle, and and they're a wonderful. The people Hardmans are wonderful people, and his mother slapped the shit out of me one time
Yeah.
when I was messing up years ago, and my mom, her response was not, "How could you do this to my son?" It was, "What did you do?"
Yeah.
And so community was there a long time ago. Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off on your story, but it really, that's a key cog for me right now is that whole
It is.
global, our whole communities and getting back to that instead of somehow trying to survive off of this whole country collective. You can't do it. You got to be with your community. You got to have resources to go to.
You got to have resources and you got to
Mm-hmm.
have community. That we
Mm-hmm.
were not meant to do this life alone. And considering that we're living in this like digital age now where we literally have no connection outside of like screens and monitors and like
Mm-hmm.
phones, um, community is literally going away.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's really hard. And so especially when you're overcoming or trying to overcome past trauma, it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
how in the world, because we because of the lack of community in just the world right now, how then can I come to you and say, hey, I actually overcame a really hard thing, it's called trafficking, but I really just need some help with navigating? Because the first thing you're not gonna hear anything else I say. You're gonna hear trafficking. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, I can't believe, and then so nothing else I say of like, no, I'm actually just a person.
Yeah.
Like I still need to learn how to, I still want to go to school. I still have kids. I like, I like football. I like all the things.
Yeah.
I'm still a human. But when people hear trafficking, it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not downplaying
Teeth
it.
clenching.
Trafficking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trafficking is horrible. Don't get me wrong. But what I really try to communicate is that it's people. This is a people problem.
Mm-hmm.
We are individuals. Everyone has some kind of trauma, right? Ours just happens to be trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
There are some specialties that there are some unique needs that trafficking overcomers need, and people that have survived trafficking need, but it's still a person,
Yeah.
right? My need may be different than yours, but you're
Mm-hmm.
still a person and I'm still a person. And I think as a society, when we hear like the word trafficking or abused person, it's like now for some reason, and not intentionally, but we get like diminished. And it's like
Yeah.
as a human, right? And so 1211, the meat of what we do, the heartbeat of what we do is mentorship. And really, mentorship is just another way to say partnership. Mentorship is just the word that everyone understands. But if
Hmm.
I had a choice to call it, it would just be partnerships. So partnering with individuals who are also on their journey to overcoming. And what does that look like? Well, it's very individualized. What do you need? Some people are in crisis and do need immediate shelter and all those things, but then other people just need business advice. Like
Hmm.
I'm launching a new business. Can you tell me how to run an LLC? Can you tell me how to do taxes so that the IRS people don't come after me? Can you tell me how to do something? I just want to be a citizen. How do I contribute as a normal, not just normal, but as a productive, successful, healthy citizen, like everyone else should be? I
Yeah.
just want to be that. How do I get there? So a lot of what we do in our partnerships, a lot of the conversations, again, we address crisis, of course, just because people are in need, real need. But then it's like showing them the ropes of like, hey, what are you passionate about? You want to write? Great. Let's figure out how you can become an author. You still need money. We still need a job and all the things. But like, you don't have anyone to process that with.
Hmm.
So that's what we try to provide.
Do you part? Is it partnering people? Is it partnering survivors with survivors, or is it mentors from the entire spectrum?
So it's survivor led, but our mentors are from the entire spectrum. So the way that we have it now are mentor circles.
Okay.
So we have a peer partner, which is an individual that has experienced trafficking. This is one with lived experience, who is in their healing journey and and has the capacity to walk alongside someone. But then we also
Hmm.
have in that circle we have an ally partner, and that ally person is just, hey, I don't have the trafficking experience, but I know how to do, like I know how to do taxes. I know I have skills that I can provide. I know how to plug you into other resources, because that's the whole thing, plugging people into other resources. And then a part of that circle is the career partner. So the career path partner is focused on, okay, you want to start a business, this is what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
Or you want this job, right, as a manager, this is what you're going to have to do to get there. You want your GED, this is what you're going to have to do to get there. So everyone's kind of focused on their own thing. So the peer partner is focused on like, hey, I got you. I know the triggers. I get all of that. This is what worked for me. The ally is, hey, here's a network of support. Let's plug you into resources. And the career is like very focused. Those together, and then you have the person themselves. So the four people together working together in this partnership, not only does it build you an instant community of support,
Hmm.
but it also grows your community, because we believe at 1211, like, we don't want people to be dependent on us for the next 5 years. That would be foolish. How are we serving them? So we've got to introduce you to like Jeff. We got to introduce you to like all the people, so that when you're in need of something, you know who to call, not just 1211. You know what I mean? So now
Hmm.
your support network is built. So that's kind of how we roll.
And that relationship is not a one-way street. And it what that's good. Those relationships are good for everybody. They're good for people to help. I guess I've always told people, if you're suffering from depression, go find someone to help. And but also now these people, um, these victims, these survivors, now a good thing for them is to have people that depend on them as well, because helping people is so significant, and being important to other people is significant for anybody's personal development. And it sounds like what you're saying with 1211 is that, hey, look, we're going to take these survivors. These survivors are just as talented. They're just as smart. They have passions as well. They have things they want to do. I wanted to write. I'm writing now. It took me 40 years, or took me to age 40 something to do it, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing my own writing now, and it's saying, hey, you missed the only thing you don't have is the guidance that other people got. So we're going to help you in with that guidance, and that to me is so, gosh, it's such a, how do I put this? I don't say empowering, but it's such a respectable way. It's just to help people. It empowers them, and makes them not to feel like a victim. It's like, okay, I'm working with someone. I'm not some poor thing someone's carrying around every day. Teaching them to I don't need to teach you to walk. I just need to you hold your hand when you first start. You already
Hmm.
know how. And so that's what I like about your process there, because you've got a real unique approach to it at 1211. And I think it works a lot. And 1211 partners, um, how can someone find out information about that, read about it, and how to help with 1211 partners?
Yeah, 1211 is, you can go to our website, www.1211.com.
Mm-hmm.
.org. So 12 spelled out, 11 the number. So
Mm-hmm.
11, 1211.org.
Mm-hmm.
And all the information is there. We're also all over social media as well. 1211 on Instagram and on LinkedIn. And you could just follow me and I'll tell you all the things. We're always looking for people to partner with, specifically because we have one goal through our mentorship, which is to develop leaders,
Mm-hmm.
not survivor leaders, but leaders.
That's what I was trying to say. That it was, I don't know, I was trying to verbalize what it made me think when you said it. But yes, you're not trying to develop people, get people out of this and just be babies that are being held along the whole time. You're
Mhm.
opening the door, like helping them open the door and be who they were meant to be in the first place. Right?
100%. Yep,
Oh, that's great.
that's our goal.
And where else is there? Where else can we find your book? You said you could repeat the name one more time for me.
Destined, the unspoken revealed.
Okay, and that's on Amazon. They can is it,
Yep.
they can buy it on Amazon. And is there any other way, sites or information that you would like the viewers to be able to look to for information on you or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram as Kat Givens, Kat Givens,
Hmm.
and usually I post pretty much everything, all the happenings, right, and on LinkedIn
Mm.
as well. So everything
Mm.
that we're doing with 1211 or that I'm doing with public speaking or any kind of awareness projects that I'm in, I usually typically try to keep people um, updated with that
Mm.
information. So that's an easy way to get plugged into.
Okay, great. Well, Kathy, our time is coming to an end. You've given me an hour, and like I said, from the first moment I learned about you and met you, I was blown away, impressed by who you are, what you've overcome, and what you're doing, and to look at what the impact you're making is remarkable. And from society's point of view, thank you. Thank you so much for all you do. I'm honored that you let me help in some ways through Red M and other ways to help 1211 partners, and I thank you for that as well, because it's been such a great experience for me to learn from people like you, and to be trained by people like you, and to be able to be mentored by you. I know you probably don't consider yourself mentoring me, but you're going to. You just don't know it yet. And David has been, obviously Davis Reed was my first mentor in this journey. So
Yeah.
I greatly appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing, and good luck going forward in all that I know you're going to be doing.
Hey, thanks for your willingness to have the hard conversations. That's what I
Mm,
really appreciate. So
yep.
thank you for having me.
All right. You have a good weekend, and look forward to talking to you again.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. So it's off now.